Okay, welcome. It's Wednesday, August 27th, and Digital Roundtable is on. We have a great guest today, and there's lots going on to talk about. But before we have any conversation, let's have our own John Sibley Butler play some intro music.
Well, I know it's kind of late. I hope I didn't wake you, but what I've got to say can't wait. I know you'd understand. Every time I tried to tell you, the words just came out wrong. So I'll have to say I love you in a song.
All right, Johnny. So Johnny, there's so much going on. I want to get your take on it, and then Llewellyn, and then we'll go and introduce our guest. But there's this thing called the era of AI generated ransomware has arrived. And crypto money is top of mind everywhere. And we have talked about the first one people company $1 trillion valuation based on AI innovation, and the grid and all the infrastructure that is going to see the benefits and the challenges from it, uh, and the incredible amount of intellectual property that is going to be generated, Johnny. And entrepreneurship is your life. And so what say you?
Well, I think the greatest thing, and I have books on tech transfer and patents, as I've done all my life, but the greatest thing that happened that would disrupt the entire world is what the Chinese company did with the cellular phones. Have you heard about that?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
No longer, and I'll say it again, I would start every session with this. Cell
Mhm.
phones are now obsolete. What that means now is that you can stand anywhere in the world and make a cell phone call because what was the Huawei? Is that the company?
Huawei, yeah.
Huawei in 2019 when America limited to invaders when they said you need to cut back. Well, they did their own things and they created a system where you can pick up your cell phone. They have a system of satellites flying around, passing off the information, and you
Mhm.
never need the billions and billions and billions of dollars that we are
Mhm.
spending on towers. That is absolutely gone. I
Yep.
think that we're that I think that will revolutionize everything. And so what has happened basically, when the book was written on The World is Flat, Friedman's book,
Mhm.
everything was good, and we had to share our intellectual property with Chinese companies, and that was fine. And
Mhm.
we voted on that. Every board in America voted what I teach my students. You go where the markets are growing and the labor is cheap. And this is coming back now to bite America and the entire Western world in the butt, so to speak. So I think
Mhm.
that the battle in business is, as I always told my MBA students, management, accounting, and finance is okay, but wealth starts with technology transfer and patents.
Yeah.
So in my book, I talk about in all of my lectures, I talk about the fact that Southwest Airlines is the science of flight. As I said here before, I say that Microsoft is just a computer science company. I said that Kellogg's Corn Flakes is just a science of taste. All of this thing is based on what goes on in laboratories, and the battle over patents, it is
Mhm.
just starting. And so one of the questions that we have is, and I think what we need to do now with China is just incorporate China into the world network. China is not the Soviet Union. It is not a Cold War. We did no
Mhm.
business with the Soviet Union. They made nothing that they shipped to America. Now the entire supply chain goes through China, and that is just a fact. So the only thing that we can do, unless America is willing to go to war, that's all. America talks about war, and the Chinese talk about, you know, networking, is to bring China's manufacturing to America to provide opportunity structures for Americans themselves. And we should give our props to China, and we should do like we did everything else. The Chinese got it right. You know, Japan started with automobiles and created their wealth there. So did China. They started with automobiles and created their wealth there. And then when we said, well, you know, we're not sure that you can have the chips. They made their telephones, their iPhones, and their iPads automobiles. So automobiles now are just iPhones in China, and it would come to America in the same way. So I think the most important thing now is not necessarily the whole idea of the new technologies that will write an essay for you. Okay. The idea now is who owns the patents and who owns the technology going forward. So AI is another great machine that's going on. But you know, in this cloud capitalism that we find ourselves in, it's just another tool to do great things. But remember, in cloud capitalism and how we communicate, what they have done in China is a seamless connection. Telephones, iPhones, computers, our entire seamless connection of wealth creation and economics has been taken from the traditional obsolete towers now, cell towers, to a dynamic system that is now
Sure.
flying around the earth. So
So
I think that
So,
you know
so
the
real quick, Johnny, America already caught up because Musk is already doing the deal with his own satellites for T-Mobile so far, and maybe at some point with Verizon and AT&T. So yeah, the
well, it's not
satellite
a matter of him
backbone.
catching up. It's a matter of the services and how is it provided. But the point is the billions that we spend
Yeah.
on cell towers is absolutely done. Yes, we're going to catch up just as sure as
Well, it's
well.
not that it's done. It gives you, repeaters on any network give you more fidelity, more,
Yeah,
bandwidth, more. So it's not wasted money. It's not, but the satellites will give you global roaming at
global
no
roaming. And the
charge.
other thing is
Yeah.
I spent this morning with a major insurance company in my club from 8 o'clock
Mm-hmm.
to 12:30 on the dynamics of insurance, one of the great companies in America.
Mm-hmm.
And they flew into Austin. We had breakfast, and they flew back on their private jet. And we talked about how AI and et cetera is affecting the workplace and the job market, how mundane kind of tasks will replace individuals, right? And those things are very, very, very important. And let me just comment on AI, and then I move along. You know,
Mm-hmm.
back in graduate school at Northwestern University, we used to say garbage in and garbage out for data. If you don't know what questions to ask AI, it does nothing for you.
Yeah.
If you don't know what you need from AI, it does nothing for you. But if you say review all of the court cases relating to tobacco, it'll do it in less than 5 seconds. And it would generally take a graduate student, somebody, right, 3 weeks to do that. That is the nightmare. Just as the telegram and the telegraph cut the movement of time in half to get tasks done. AI is tough. It will do that. So right
Mm-hmm.
now, I can say review for me all of the research on organizational science and crime, and it's done from the best from the best academic journals in the world. But remember, old John Sibley Butler says you got to be able to ask the right questions because the questions have always been more important than answers in the scientific endeavor.
Sure. All right,
Oh, I got a
Llewellyn.
true. Wait a minute. That wasn't Llewellyn that said true, was it? Did I have a?
Oh, yeah, we agree with you, Johnny. We agree with you.
Oh my gosh, what happened to Llewellyn?
Llewellyn,
Llewellyn.
what say you? You're muted.
Once again, I find myself in the embarrassing situation of having to agree with John Sibley Butler. Shortly, nobody will watch this program because we're not supposed to agree. We are at a time when everything we know essentially is going to be upended. And it's a paradoxical situation with AI. On the one hand, it is coming into the workplace very quickly, but it's coming in rather unofficially, while companies are still trying to decide whether they will embrace AI and in what way. On the shop floor where people work, everybody is using AI. If you go into a room full of workers in a bullpen, you'll find they're all working with AI, but in the C-suite, they may still be debating how to use it. That's one thing. And the other upending thing is that we are facing in the tech companies a possible AI bubble. And that is that huge quantities of money have been invested in AI, trying to get in front, trying to be the dominant player, but nobody has a viable business plan. If you are the front runner, or even if you're number 2 or 3, how do you make money out of being an AI provider? And I haven't heard, I've been asking this at universities, in companies, in conferences. Nobody has an answer. They have bits of an answer. Some think it'll be somewhat like the internet, where it's been advertising supported, but nobody really. So they say it will be done with paywalls, with subscriptions. And yet nobody wants to embrace subscriptions because you won't get the market share you're hoping to have. So you're fighting against yourself there. And if the AI bubble bursts, it won't mean that AI has gone away. It will simply mean that the AI companies are in trouble, or are possibly reducing their emphasis on AI. But AI itself will be here to stay, and people will use it, and it will have its two, again, diametrically opposed consequences. It will make some things much better, and it will cost a lot of jobs, especially in the first 10 or 20 years of its widespread deployment. And I'm inclined to agree with a friend of mine at the University of Southern California, is likely to be felt most egregiously for the first time in probably 2 years, which will have a very interesting effect on the next general election. One of the things that we have today is that the role of AI, this impending upending of everything by AI, has not got any political purchase. Neither political party has addressed it. Neither of them has any idea how to accommodate it and how to live with it. You can't get rid of it, so you're going to have to accommodate it. And no political party has given it any serious thought. They think of it as, oh, well, it's the internet on steroids. It isn't. It's much, much more than that. And anyway, I'm anxious to hear from our guests, because part of what all this involves is IP. And where does it go? And as a writer, I'm not very happy that the AI presumably incorporates what I've written into, in some ways I can find it, into its output. On the other hand, I'm very glad to be quoted. So this is the dilemma. It's almost the same dilemma of the IT companies in not wanting to have a paywall because they want more participation. But if they have too much participation and no income, the end is known. So it's a very interesting challenge, and it's quite new to us, really. I would point out a couple of things that have made me very optimistic about AI. One, I think I mentioned it last time I was on, is that if you have dubious government statistics and there's some suggestion that the government may want to play with the inflation figures, for example, those can be established with AI very quickly. And Johnny's quite right. Ask it the right question, you get the right answer. So you have a kind of shadow government that is possible with AI, and also some seemingly impossible things can be resolved. Local news is dead, and it's a very serious social problem in the US. we're not getting the state houses covered, the courts covered, because the local news industry is flat on its back. However, we do have an enormous world of people communicating with each other on the internet in localized networks. Yeah, where I live, there's one based around the building I live in. It's many thousands of people more, and it's probably tops about 1,500, maybe 2,000. And they churn up a lot of news, but it's libelous, it's unreliable, they don't know how to write. In 5 years or even quicker, you could take all that output, give it to AI to manage it, to edit, to take out the libel, to take out the inaccuracies, to fact check it, and produce a new news product, a local news product, where you had made all these gossips into reporters, and ergo you solved the lack of local news problem. And then, as you see, say on Facebook, a lot of people would become reporters. People do things on Facebook to see their own words there or their own photographs. Unfortunately, it's often a photograph of a dog, and much as I love dogs, I don't know how many dogs on Facebook you can look at before you go slightly crazy. Anyway, that's my take, and I'm keen.
Thank you, Llewellyn. So I'm delighted to welcome Kalyan Banerjee, who is the co-founder, chief growth officer at Lumenci. And Lumenci is a full-service IP consulting firm dedicated to extracting maximum value from IP assets and providing technical valuation and strategic advice to patent owners and law firms to drive successful results. Welcome, Kalyan.
Thank you so much for having me, Andres.
So tell us about you, tell us about your company, and what are your thoughts on what an opportunity it is to be alive today and be dealing with IP.
Absolutely. So I'm Kalyan Banerjee, co-founder and chief growth officer at Lumenci. We are about a 120 people company at the moment, headquartered here in Austin, Texas. Started roughly 8 years ago, and we bootstrapped the firm to service technology companies, startups, and law firms, outside counsel, in-house counsel, investors in IP, and that part of the ecosystem to make sure that inventors get their due. And they get their due by making sure that appropriate IP strategies are in place when they are trying to get the maximum value out of it. So we built out a team in various places. And most recently, a few months ago, we got backed by 2 private equity, one out of New York called VSS, and the other from Boston called Century Equity Partners. We are a platform investment now, which essentially means that after looking through the entire market, these 2 private equity groups thought that Lumenci is their best horse, basically, for the next several years to be the top IP brand in the country. And so that's our goal right now. My role in the firm is customer development and growing the firm to make sure our customers are happy and we continue to expand and grow. Very happy to meet everybody. Thank you for the invitation. And I love the conversation on IP. I initially thought that it would also be about blockchain. So anywhere this technology conversation leads us, I'm very happy to.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about all kinds of things. So it strikes me that I was going to ask these guys a quick question and maybe get their opinions and maybe get yours as well. So the federal government, the Trump administration has done a new thing. They have changed the CHIPS Act, and I think they have suspended the funding of the CHIPS Act, but they have given funding to Intel for 10% of the company. What are your thoughts, John Sibley Butler?
Well, first of all, if you look at, we're in a sort of interesting, quote, dilemma here in America, given the greatness of what China has done. And it is this: America's brand is democracy. America's brand is democracy, and that's the brand throughout the world. The Chinese brand is the Communist Party. That's the reality. So we have an interesting historical mix here. On the one hand, the democracy, go back to Schumpeter's book, Democracy and etc., is that democracy is having a tough time with philosophically a communist kind of government. Now, what does it mean? First of all, philosophically, this is the first time in the history in my life that America has a competitor, a legitimate competitor. But the competitor is not from another democratic country that we have spread democratic ideas around the world. It is coming from a completely different kind of philosophical company. So it goes like this. When the Chinese want to do something, I want you to think of China as one big venture capitalist firm. And what we do in venture capital is we take chances on different ideas and we let one idea pay for the other. So what China does is to advertise and say, okay, we're gonna create electric cars, and the government gives the money for them to basically create the cars, and the one that takes off, the government essentially supports. The same thing is true of China. The government would go and build a brand new city with nobody in it. We cannot do that in America. As a matter of fact, one of the strategies that the president took when he first became president was surround himself with billionaires, because for him to compete with China, he would have to go through the Congress of the United States because the president doesn't have any money. The White House has no money. All the money is in Homeland Security, right? And so what he said was, let me get my billionaires together, the block, and I mean everybody that's and et cetera, so that I can compete with that. So what do I have to say about that? That is the only way. We're going to have to redraw the line, the separation between government and industry. For years and years and years, we said that we wanted no governmental interference in business, only as it relates to national defense and other kinds of things.
So in other words,
And wait a minute,
Obama.
one other thing. We did one thing. Obama bailed out General Motors, and General Motors paid Americans back.
But we
So
should have gotten his equity on it instead of a bailout.
and inequity, right? So can you imagine that all of a sudden, remember, I see China as one great big venture firm.
Sure.
Okay. Can you imagine that your taxpayer money is going to take a chance on Andre Carvalho's big idea
Yeah.
that might go south? Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but what venture firms do is to spread the risk. I am an investor
Yep.
myself. I might invest in 5 companies, but if one hits, I'm good.
Yeah. Let me get Llewellyn's take on that. Llewellyn, government getting writing on the Intel success. What are your thoughts? You're muted. You're muted.
Sorry, I don't think the US government should own any stock. I don't think that that's viable. I don't think it's legal either. I remember when we were privatizing uranium enrichment, at one time there was a government monopoly on it. These arguments came up, and that some countries favor this. It's called a golden share. I don't think it's very constructive. It puts the government in competition with other companies that did not have a government share.
But you are aware that the Communist Party owns the majority on every company in China, right?
Well, no, that's not actually true.
Yes, it is.
They have huge influence if they wish to. But this idea that China is in
They own 51% of every company in China.
This idea that China is insuperable and invincible is really very foolish. You cannot have a centralized economy. They call it communist. It's not communist at all. The definition of communism is that the means of production should be owned by the people. That's not part of their thing. But they have a lot of rotten companies they support. They have rotten banks that could go down at any time. You saw it in their real estate business. And anytime you have people sitting in Beijing trying to decide what happens out in the countryside, you get both corruption, inefficiency, and failures that are papered over. I do think that they've shown extraordinary leadership, and I'm right with Johnny on this, in technology, but that does not mean they'll stay there forever. In the end, the dynamic of capitalism plus the dynamic of democracy will probably overwhelm a rigid system. But that has to play out for us to see this. We've never seen so much talent centrally controlled as we see in China. But I'd like to know from Kalyan, Give me an example of one of your typical customers and what you do for that customer.
Sure, very happy to explain that. So our customers typically are IP-rich companies, small or big, old or new, or their investors and outside advisors. So anything we do has an IP component to it. But if I can take a moment, gentlemen, and kind of give a reaction to that question,
Yeah,
I'd love to take my 2 cents. So,
please.
see, when the government is also the regulator as well as a shareholder, that causes issues, as we all can imagine. But at the same time, the question then becomes that is government now is now favoring one company over the other, or one industry over the other, because it's now a shareholder in some of these massive corporations, and because certain private corporations or even public companies use some government incentives, does it automatically mean that you are giving some shares away? So that creates a lot of uncertainty, and not only in the startup world, certainly in the startup world, but also massive publicly driven corporations. Certainly, you have situations where taking a stake in Intel, for example, certainly doesn't mean that ARM or maybe AMD or other chip makers are at a disadvantage because the federal government is a big, it's a minority stake, but still a fairly big stake of 9.9 or 10%, right, in Intel. So, but this has happened not entirely unprecedented in the overall world. This has happened from time to time in different situations. But if there is a ramp down, meaning if this is a one-time event, maybe there is a national security angle to it, because America's foundry, which used to be Intel, and also Global Foundries, eventually was taken by TSMC. TSMC is the big company out of Taiwan, which kind of is the fab for the entire world at the moment. The most high-end design companies, NVIDIA, Qualcomm, and others, everybody uses TSMC fabs. And they really have almost no competitors except for maybe an upcoming Samsung in some situations. Thankfully, they're also opening here in Texas, in Austin, the suburbs, as we all know, and also Intel. So there are some commentators who are saying there is a national security angle to it as to why the supply chain and the subsequent fabrication needs to happen here in the United States, as opposed to be totally reliant on a country where CCP kind of has their ambitions set, and suddenly the entire supply chain of the semiconductors industry crumbles down. So, from that lens, you could potentially see the merit in this as a defense play as opposed to an anti-capitalism play. This is probably more geared towards, a charitable explanation for this could really be that, hey, this is building out the security infrastructure for the company of the country, as opposed to trying to get an upside of what Intel is supposed to make in the future. But certainly, other commentators, other panelists said it is a slippery slope, and this creates a massive, or at least certainly in the short term, some level of uncertainty in many markets, that if somewhere you are associated with the defense or national security, for example, cybersecurity companies, is all of a sudden federal government going to say that I'll have stocks in Palo Alto Networks or Fortinet or any of these other firms, right? What about the nascent stablecoin bill? Because of that, a lot of blockchain and financial services companies are going to do really well, including Circle, Coinbase, and others. So is the government going to say, because we are regulating you properly, now we are going to take a stake in you? So it does create a slippery slope. So as long as there is a ramp down, that, hey, for a certain period of time, we could take as an exception for ABC type of reasons, I could imagine a situation where the public could understand that situation. The private markets could also appreciate it with a cap and with a ramp down plan. It cannot be the government's only playbook. There has to be some other angle. So now with that said, I
Yeah,
can
well,
come back.
let me comment on that. I think that the fundamental issue for us has always been shareholders. That is, if I own the Cleveland Browns, I can pick it up and move it to California if I wanted it. You can't do that in Germany because they have a stakeholder. Because the country has a stake in Mercedes. Mercedes owners could not just pick up Mercedes and move it to Chicago. But Michael Dell could pick up Dell Computers and move it to Munich, Germany. And that's because we are based on that whole idea of shareholders that was set, of course, with Abraham Lincoln when he said that if you invent something, then it's yours. It does not belong to the government of the United States. Not only is it a slippery slope, but the question that we have is this: when you look at how ideas evolve, then what happens then when the government, of course, during World War II, everything was taken over. The airlines were taken over by the federal government. Everything was taken over. But our fundamental notion of shareholders is that the shareholders own the firm and that the CEO is responsible to the shareholders and not the country of the United States of America. Now, of course, in times of great conflicts, World War II, when we produced, when Ford Motor Company converted to producing, the dictates of war, whether it was whatever it might be. But if you're going to mix the two, it's going to be interesting. Now, philosophically, we can always change. For example, right now, I think this administration is overstepping its barriers in terms of the law. I think that conflict of interest is not being forced, and that's one of the fundamental things that we have. So you can always change things. But Llewellyn might be right when he says that the private sector will always really, really, really be ahead of the idea that the government should invest. Now, let me give you an experiment.
Let me change gears real
Wait a
quick.
minute, Andreas, let me say this. We tried it in the great state of Texas. Rick Berry, we created a $280 million investment fund in the great state of Texas. The problem was all the money was going to people in Central Texas because that's where all the innovation was going on. What happened to West Texas, East Texas, and South Texas? Well, the senator said, we don't want to do that anymore because we're not benefiting. Is that right, Andreas?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
Let me change gears real quick. Kalyan, I'm an entrepreneur. I have a dilemma. If I file a patent with you, with your help, I know that I have 17 years on that patent, but people would read my patent and find workarounds on the patent. What if I decide to do a trade secret and not a patent? And how do you go about determining that?
Oh, sure. Good question. If the invention you have is can be reverse engineered pretty easily by looking through your public applications, then there are some arguments as to why you should keep it a trade secret. But remember, for trade secret, the test really is that first, it should be kept a secret. You took enough efforts to keep it a secret and you documented those efforts. The fact that you kept it a secret, and if a competitor gets their hand illicitly on that, or they misappropriate it, they can gain economic advantages because it was not kept a secret. And third, that nobody else knows about it. If something is in already public domain, you cannot have it as your trade secret. So there are certain ways in which proving a trade secret misappropriation case becomes harder. But a patent case, from that perspective, you already were open about it, that this was my invention, and the society is giving me a 20-year, almost a monopoly on this particular idea to pursue. And if other people do it without your permission, they're supposed to pay a licensing fee. Now, whether you can force them to pay a licensing fee or how costly it could be to take on that endeavor is a separate question, but that's the idea.
Should a software company file for patents or keep their innovation as trade secrets?
A lot of the cutting edge in software should be patented, and many companies continue to do that. For example, software, how it can be implemented in different types of hardware. What is the interface with AI? How it can be deployed in a multi-cloud scenario? How much faster or more efficient can it be in a certain situation? So there are many types of innovations that can happen in terms of how you develop software, how you deploy that solution, and how scalably other people use it. So all those situations continue to get good level of software filings.
My last question real quick, and before I turn to my colleagues. Kalyan, clearly intellectual property over the years has gone from being maybe a rare commodity to a much more liquid commodity. You would agree with that. And I've seen come and go what's called intellectual property exchanges, where people can actually upload what they're selling in intellectual property, and then there are buyers of that. Do you see the sort of the liquidity and the proliferation of intellectual property as an artifact through NFTs or anything like that becoming more and more popular, easier to trade, easier to buy, or not?
There have been several efforts in those directions, as you outlined, from a marketplaces to NFTs to other forms of tokenization of the IP asset itself. There have been many companies who have tried that, but so far, very limited success in improving the liquidity. What has happened though is that the marketplace has built out a new economic arrangement where people who are developing the IP are partnering with finance and other strategy providers to get the right value for their IP, as opposed to being totally public about it. So there are some marketplaces right now, Andreas, that where you can mention that I have these many patents in these technologies, and if somebody wants to potentially diligence them, please sign an NDA with me, then I will tell you.
Sure,
So it is,
sure.
yeah, from that perspective, some solutions definitely have emerged. But from a success or not standpoint, we still continue to see that people with IP need to partner up with people who have the expertise in evaluating that IP and positioning to the right funding partners.
Absolutely. Llewellyn.
Yes, I have a question. How are we doing with getting good ideas out of the government? We have a rather cumbersome system called the CRADAs, Cooperative Research and Development Agreements. I helped work on those years ago. Are we getting the ideas out, or should we look to a different way of getting the benefit of what is discovered in government laboratories but doesn't necessarily make it into the marketplace? One of the solutions, of course, which is rather radical, is to fire the top people in all these labs and the technology will fly out. But short of that, how are we doing getting technology out of the labs and into the marketplace?
So there are two types of things different people have tried and continue to do so. One is through when these labs have partnerships with other companies for the implementation side, while the lab continues to do research, they collaborate with other private sector companies to actually commercialize that research. John would know all about it. And then, and on the other side, because of these, sometimes there are parties who say that we will buy the patents and the IP from universities, either through a spin out mechanism where the university itself spins out a company, with the professor as the lead, and then they seek private investments to grow that firm. And most large universities have that kind of a program anyways. And then the other mechanism is there are many accelerators that have come up broadly in the country right now. In Bay Area, there is one. There are several in Austin and in other, tech-heavy ecosystem places. There are other accelerators now who work with the university system directly to make sure that their fundamental research can be commercialized in some other way. So these.
Then I wasn't thinking about universities so much as the big government laboratories. There are 17 just Department of Energy laboratories. There are a whole bunch of NIH research centers. Those tend to be incorporate more universities. But most of the fundamental research is done at government laboratories. And that's where the rub is. How do you get that research out? The universities seem to me to be a lot more agile and a lot more commercial in their thinking than, say, Sandia or Los Alamos or Brookhaven or Fermi or any of these government laboratories.
Private sector collaboration of those people. And one of the things that you also explained is letting the top researchers go and start something of their own. So that would certainly enforce a lot of acceleration in implementation of those fundamental research. But at the same time, their incentives are slightly different. Sometimes they are related to fundamental research, sometimes related to national security. And there are government grants or funding. For example, DoD funds a lot of defense-oriented companies, and they give out a lot of private contracts. And the entire defense industry is kind of based on what the
I was involved with the 3 big weapons labs, and
There we go.
And during the writing of the craters, and it was a mess. I mean, we could not come up with a simple, elegant way of getting the technology out of the lab, and it became very cumbersome. And then I lost track. I ran, I think, 4 conferences on technology transfers from the government, because most of the technology that has been transformational in our lives has come out of the government. Came out of ARPA, or it came out of some other place in the government, came out of NASA, for example, hugely transformational. And yet it leaked out slowly. It wasn't an organized system. And often the private sector took no notice of it. I remember once I was at Argonne National Laboratory, and they showed me some parts for engines. They were ceramic parts for abusive uses in engines. And they were giving up on them because they couldn't get the automobile manufacturers to take an interest. And the automobile manufacturers had one question: are the Japanese using it yet? It was very disillusioning. And I found a lot of disillusion when I was working closely with the laboratories. I found a lot of disillusion with how slow it was to move technology into the public sector, and how fast it seemed to happen in other countries. At that time, primarily Japan, but China was just coming on. So I just throw that out.
Well, Llewellyn,
IP is an inhibitor as well as a protector.
As my good friend, I'm shocked that you didn't call me, since I wrote the ultimate book on technology transfer. Now, we've been knowing each other a long time.
I did that. No.
All you had to do was
I
say,
had many
Dr. Butler, I know that I don't want, I don't want to call you because I don't want you to bring out your genius, but if you just go read all of the global issues and perspectives on technology transfer by John Sibley Butler and Dave Gibson, all of your problems would have been solved. But anyway, let me return to my guest here. Llewellyn is right in a lot of sense, but the universities are a mess. In the 1980s, we moved technology transfer from private labs to university and created something called the Major Research University. Now, as a professor at the University of Texas, I get absolutely no chops at all for technology transfer. Okay? All of my evaluations based on publications, placement of graduate student, none based on technology transfer. So my question to you is this. It is very difficult to deal with universities. You take my university, University of Texas. You have so many lawyers involved because they're trying to get a piece of a company that we don't know what the market is going to do with. On the other hand, Stanford University would say, just take it and let us know when you do well. So what has been your experience with universities versus the private sector? Llewellyn is right. Most of the great things that made America great came out of the private laboratories, but also a lot of the companies, right, came from where? Came from universities, but they were also funded by DOD. They were funded by NASA because of the hundred of the 100 billion of the $1 billion we do at the University of Texas. Hey, 80% of that is governmental funding. So, and right now I'm working with, look it up, WAVE, W-A-V-E, and they're trying to create an organization in Texas, Baylor University WAVE, to take out technologists. So what is wrong with universities? What's the mechanism where you go to a professor like me, I have a great idea, and they argue over percentage of the company when it equals zero? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, sure. 100% of zero is zero. So unless some economic value is created, nobody makes anything. So we have, in our experience, we have found two types of issues. One is the issue of internal incentive alignment. There are many participants, many decision makers, people looking over their shoulder, people managing their own brand, thinking through how will this affect me? This is not my really core job, and so on and so forth. The internal incentives need to be aligned properly, not only with the tech commercialization office, but also with the inventors who actually invented those particular patterns. And the second piece, which is on the positive note, what has been helpful is having sort of a structured program, some sort of an openness to the idea that it's okay to make money from the patents and the R&D we have developed, unless the system and the powers that be within a particular university are morally okay and incentives oriented, aligned towards making or getting economic value out of that IP and the R&D. Something or the other, somebody or the other would veto any new idea that comes out. So what has been helpful is some people, some universities have done this, which is identify a key set of technology area which is gaining massive adoption commercially in the marketplace, and say, hey, this particular set of technology was invented here, and so either those companies should take a license from the university, or the university should be ready to enforce. And ready to enforce means they should be ready to litigate. Now, universities typically do not want to litigate against companies simply because there are other types of mechanisms involved, including many of these companies actually fund the university research program. And on other ways, university itself doesn't want to be seen like coming after private sector, but rather than working with the private sector with their innovation engine.
I like that explanation. My beef is that's my tax money. I did a company called Glowfish, and that was a National Science Foundation company, right? There's no reason why NSF or any university to charge the maximum on taking that technology out, because it was funded by the taxpayers of America. It was not funded by private individuals going to the university. And the models that work across from my book that work right is this. Stanford's, they would say, take the technology, and if we do well, we're alums and we'll give back. Some universities make it so difficult because they have no understanding of the market, and 80% plus of the research that's being done will never go anywhere, right? But what we have to do research on is everything is serendipity, right? So one of the things that I would like to do is this. I would like to refund private, like Sandeo's, private research situations. I would like to have the technology transfer at universities for learning for students, right? And this is what I'm working with Wave from Baylor University. I was director of IC Square, and we concentrated on technology transfer in building Austin. And what's interesting about that is that we did it through the business school, but Stanford did it through engineering, because the business school does not produce anything. Why would you have a technology transfer in business? It needs to be in biology and chemistry and pharmacy and engineering, right? And et cetera. So what are you doing for the new kind of models, if you will, that will bring the technology forward? And the second one is the question that everyone has asked you. Given what we're doing in America, are all our researchers, will they go to graduate school in Germany? Will they go to graduate school in China? Will they go to graduate school in the Ivory Coast? Where will we go to graduate school in the future? Because when I left Northwestern, all of the great scholars came from Germany. The engineers were German scholars. The music was Bach. The music was Handel, right? And the German universities from Schumpeter, right, to other great scholars, Max Weber, they were all German, because the Germans created a great set of universities at the turn of the century and then let it go by the wayside. So where are we going to go? Are your kids going to go, will you send your kids to China? Because with researchers, they don't care what they study.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's
so that's my two questions.
Yeah, that's a good, both are good questions. The first one is with respect to, so going back to my previous response, there is a cultural solution to it, and then there is an economic solution to it. The cultural solution is internally, incentives need to be aligned at university and private research and these research labs to make sure that they are morally not they are unequivocally towards monetization or towards economic incentives for that. So there should be a cultural openness to it. And the universities who have done this well have then started to enforce their own IP against companies who they felt are not paying their dues for that innovation they have done. As an example, so you talked about Northwestern, that's why that example came to me. Last year, actually, Northwestern won a patent lawsuit against a robotics company. In a jury trial, they won it. Similarly, Purdue University and Wisconsin have actually gained very large jury verdicts in the past few years by enforcing their patents. Now, that doesn't mean that you enforce all of your patent, because then you feel like a litigious as opposed to a research-oriented facility. But when the private corporations and the broader ecosystem does not pay your dues, you need to make some noise. And there has to be some level of openness to be able to make that noise. And how do you do that? You do that by first, and here is that special economic part, which is portions of the patents can be carved out into a special purpose vehicle, and you bring on separate partners, both in terms of the strategy and technology, as well as in terms of actual financing, to then enforce those particular patent rights against specific types of companies, not the entire industry, but certain companies who you think are infringing on your IP. Once you get a success or two like that, all of a sudden, the entire IP of the university is seen in a different light, which your licensing rates go up, your royalty rates go up, and you're taken even more seriously. Your licensing people are taken more seriously in the broader ecosystem, because they know that if we don't pay the right amount, which should be a fair and reasonable to both parties, then there's a lawsuit to be had. And unless, it's a blessing and a curse. Curse because without lawsuit, not a lot of things move. But at the same time, it's a blessing because the rule of law and the court system in America is really good when you think from a global perspective, especially in IP, that there is enforcement possible. And because of our giant markets, what ends up happening is the damages can become very high, which becomes attractive to the other parties. So that's really the answer to the part one, John, which is there are certain economic structures now which, at no cost to the university itself, the university can have a path to their IP being monetized in the right manner. And to the second one, where do you send your kids to study in the future? My answer is the same. You send your kids to America, continue to do so, and in the specific areas that you like. There is an American exceptionalism which does attract talent from all over the world. It will continue to be so. And the mere fact that we are talking about this is the reason why we will improve.
Yeah, I agree. Those are
Unless
good.
there is an openness and vulnerability to talk about those vulnerable areas,
Yes.
you're not going to improve. And that's the beauty of the entire American system, which is because you talk openly about the weaknesses, it eventually somebody solves for it. And in the long enough time scale, the exceptionalism continues.
I love those answers. I'm a proud PhD from Northwestern University. Big supporter. I know that help company involved. But let me tell you about how we rank universities. This is very interesting. My alma mater, Northwestern, was ranked as the #1 technology transfer. That was one company. One company. And you know the company, that was a health company, right? But I don't know why the universities cannot just make the portfolio open for business people to come in and commercialize it, because it is the taxpayers' money. The universities. So what we did in the 1980s to say, okay, if we give you a grant for, like, there's a guy that's working on a smart boot now that I'm working with, right? Well, the grant is yours, but it was paid for by the American taxpayers. I want it set up like Stanford. I want Texas Tech University, University of Wisconsin, University of Michigan, and MIT to open it up for entrepreneurs to come in and say, let me commercialize the technology. And if I do well, then we'll talk about
There
doing
you
well.
go.
The boys and girls who did Google will give Stanford billions of dollars, because Stanford
Sure.
said, boys and girls, take it and run with it. Okay. So
Yeah.
I want you to get that done. I sent you an email with the Baylor stuff. I sent my number to you. And I don't want you to do like my distinguished colleague, Llewellyn King, who did not call the guy who wrote the ultimate book on technology transfer as he was struggling with the information. But I still love him to death.
Llewellyn, final thoughts. You're muted. You're muted. You're muted.
Llewellyn,
I thought your last remarks, Kalyan, were very, very pertinent and
yes.
to the subject, and I enjoyed them very much. This exceptionalism that has made the country a magnet, and I'm certainly an immigrant. And very recently, I was sitting with a group of AI people at a company in New York, and we went out to lunch. And looking around the table, 2 people were born in Spain, 3 in India, and 1 in Bangladesh, and myself. None of us were born in America. So we started discussing why we were here. And it was this possibility, this extraordinary magnetic, and I hope it's not destroyed by some of the political folly that is going on. I've enjoyed your remarks very much, and I thank you.
Appreciate it.
Johnny, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think the issue of where it would be in the future is a viable issue given what's going on in American universities. And I'm talking to scientists. Remember that we took our space program from Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Remember we took our jet engines from Germany.
Remember we took them from Britain.
From Britain, and from Britain we took.
It was invented, but
Britain, Llewellyn was born in Africa, but he's always supporting the British, which is pretty wild. So we must, as Llewellyn bring out, our PhD students are students that names you can't pronounce real well, and they're doing well. So I'm going to send you some more.
Yes, John, to your point, just look at the LLM and AI related research that came out.
Absolutely.
You just cannot pronounce, or you don't know the last names for, but that is what drives the innovation. So
because knowledge and
know-how,
and the knowledge from the ancient world, we're just beginning to get back to. The research is just starting on knowledge from the ancient. Anyway, it's been very, very good, very enjoyable. My only regret is that Llewellyn did not call me. And let me tell you something. I'm going to give him a telephone and get on his butt like white on rice.
Before you ever wrote that book, Cheers. Thank you. I've got to go. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye,
Thank you, everybody.
Kaylin. Thank
Bye.
you very
For the
much.
guitar,
Johnny, take us
quick.
away.
Bring us your tired and weak, and we will make them strong. Bring us your foreign songs, and we will sing along. Bring us your broken dreams. We'll give them time to mend. There's still a lot of room. Living in the promised land. Living in the promised land. Our dreams are made of steel. The prayer of every man to know how freedom feels. We are the multitudes. Give us a helping hand. Is there no love anymore? Living in the promised land.
Thank you,
so much.
Johnny.
You bet. Take care.
Kaylin, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
Kaylee.
so much.
Kaylee, give me a
We'll
shout.
be
I
in
left my
touch.
number
We'll
there. Give me
follow
a
up.
shout.
Absolutely.
Okay, bye-bye.
Absolutely. Check your Andres and John.
Mhm.
Thanks. Bye.